Joe Biden issues an executive order aimed at reducing gun violence, saying that it is common sense. What will it do? Well, for the most part, it will just, it will force law-abiding citizens to have a mild inconvenience when they go to buy firearms for the next time that they buy firearms. In other news, a Russian jet hits a U.S. military drone over the Black Sea, forcing it to come down near Ukraine and forcing a new diplomatic nightmare for the Biden admin. So we'll be talking about that, what's happening there, and what we do with that next. The FDIC has named Tim Mayopoulos as the CEO of Silicon Valley Bank, and his first order of business is to tell you to come back out and put all your money back into Silicon Valley Bank. So we'll talk about that, what's happening there, and what we do next. And as spring break approaches, thousands heed the warning to avoid Mexico, instead turning their destination to sunny Florida. It is going to be all this and more. I was the one flying the balloon. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. All excited, we were right there. It was 6:02, and after having gotten out of work late for the entire last week, and being a little bit late especially with such big news shows as we've had over the past couple days, I was there at 6:02, ready to get started, and we had the Spectrum Gremlins again. I'm watching the monitors right now to make sure that we do stay alive at this point, but it's taken me quite a while before we actually kept a live stream going. In fact, this is the third YouTube stream that started since we got here, since I hit the go live button. I'm sorry, it's the fourth, not the third. This is the fourth YouTube. The first three shut down after a few seconds because we had such a bad bandwidth going off there. But since the cold open, I have not seen anything pop up here, and it's Spectrum. It's occasionally they have problems everywhere, but other than that, it looks like we're all green right now. Everything's looking good. So we're gonna take it as it is, and we will go. I'll go to 6:15 or 8:15 rather tonight, just because of the fact that, yes, in spite of the fact that I was sitting here, my internet provider had other plans for me, but we can talk about that in the background. For now, we have a lot to get to today over here on Contemporary. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as the Daily Ignoramus, the Breakdown with Birkenhoff, the R-Rated Conservative, the Porch Boys. Go check out Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, the No Gimmicks Podcast, and more, as we bring you a better news experience from the common man for the common man. That is right. For too long, we have all got all of our news from people who wear suits that cost more than our houses, people who've never had to make the same decisions that you have to make sometimes on a daily basis, or maybe had to make in the past. Maybe you're doing better now than you've done before. So go check out people who have had to make some of the same decisions that you have over on our news network that is burgeoning right now. We've got a lot going on with that and a lot of stuff going behind the scenes. I know Mr. Ignoramus has been off for a couple days because he has been ill, but don't let that stop you from going over and checking him out. It's a great program. Porch Boys, I don't know what happened with them. R-Rated Conservative will be coming back in just a couple weeks, so a lot of stuff moving, a lot of stuff shaking. Go check out all of that. And as always, you can check me out over here on youtube.com/jedgar101, twitch.tv/jedgar101. Do that one. I get paid from that one. dlive.tv/edsblog Twitter, and trovo.tv also /edsblog Twitter. Go check out all that great programming. Twitter.com/jedgar102 if you want to reach out to me, or the Discord that will be floating through. It's either in the description or we'll be floating through the live chat for you as we go along. And let's get down into the main news of the day. Let's go and start with the finance. Wow. And I can talk today. Reminder also that if you want to check me out on Instagram, instagram.com/jedgar102. But remember, you don't get the news scene, you don't get the music, and you don't get the videos if you're over on that platform. Let's get into it. Let's get started. Starting with the Dow. Let's get the live chat up here. Oh, take care, Blind Fear. I apologize that I couldn't be up there in time, but it took a bit. It definitely did. 4 tries. 4 tries to get everything started. All right, let's get started. Starting with the Dow. The Dow is sitting at 32,155.40. That is up 336.26 points on a situation, again, where there wasn't really a lot of place to go but up. I don't think that 17,000 on a Dow is attainable anymore with the inflation. So as we approach and stay near the 30,000 mark and move down into the 20,000 marks, I think 22 is the new 17 after all the inflation that we've had. So it's getting into a choppy point, and again, we're sitting in averages where there's no place to go but up right now. So that's what we see coming off of the markets. Off of that, let's look into the Bitcoin. The Bitcoin took a major spike today, about midday, before settling back down to near its previous close. The Bitcoin is at 24,723 US dollars and 50 US cents. That is up on the day, 511 US dollars and 40 US cents. Far off of its peak. That was and looks like it's slightly crested, 26.5. Meaning that throughout the day, we've actually lost almost $2,000 on the Bitcoin, but that's after spiking itself back up that far as well. So that's what we see coming off the Bitcoin. Looking at your gas prices around the Madison area, still staying steady in a settling motion. Quick Trip is down from 2 days ago to 3.30 across almost all the stations across the metro, except for the one on the north side of the lake, which is all the way down to 3.18. The Isthmus remains at 3.30. So that is where we are at. Oh, the Isthmus, by the way, changed. BP must have finally come in and bought the final Amoco, because all the time we looked at that as an Amoco and also jumped up to 3.30 to match up with everybody else. So that is what we have for the gas prices. These are not necessarily the gas prices that are in your local area, but this is a benchmark that we've continued to watch since the start of the gas prices dump in 2020. We've continued to watch this and seen what the averages go to, so that is what we see coming off of that. Looking in at what IBD has to say for the day, Dow rallies over 300 points. Meta flashes buy signal. Bank stocks clash. Huge gains. From Ed Carson's. Dow futures were a little changed after hours, along with the S&P and the NASDAQ. Lennar headline earnings after the close, with Lennar stock signaling a buy signal late. Luke Weiss says he's stuck out in Vegas for the week. Oh, there are worse places you could be stuck. The stock market jumped Tuesday as banks such as First Republic, Western Alliance Bancorp, PacWest Bancorp, Charles Schwab, and even KeyCorp surged. But banks came off well off opening highs. The major indices closed with robust gains despite wilting for most of the afternoon. CPI inflation rate was in line with expectations, but the report took second billing to banks. A market rally attempt is underway, but investors should be cautious amid such volatile, news-driven environment. A number of stocks showed bullish action on Tuesday. Meta flashed a buy signal as Facebook and Instagram parent announced another wave of layoffs. Tesla rebounded from key support. Boeing, Lantheus, Applied Materials, MSCI, Fortinet, and Mercado Libre are all trading near buy points after holding up well in the recent market action. Meta is on swing trader. Fortinet and MSCI are on the IBD long-term leaders with what was MPWR? Oh, it didn't say. MPWR in the long-term leaders watch list. Mercado Libre, Monolithic Power, Fortinet, and Lantheus are on the IBD 50. Monolithic Power, Fortinet, and Applied Materials are on the IBD Big Cap 20. On the futures, Dow futures were roughly flat versus fair value. The S&P and the NASDAQ edged lower. Remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. So that is what we see coming out of the markets. Let's see what is happening in the employment sector. Sorry, I'm a little bit frustrated after everything that we just saw coming off of, no spectrum for almost 20 minutes. California Appeals Court reverses most ruling, deeming Prop 22 invalid. From Suhana Hussain. A California Appeals Court reversed most of a ruling invalidating Prop 22, the state's 2020 voter-approved gig economy law allowing ride giant hailing and delivery companies to classify their workers as independent contractors rather than employees. The First District Court of Appeal determined Prop 22 should stand, disagreeing with the 2021 ruling, finding that the central provisions of the law conflicted with the state constitution, rendering the law unenforceable, and tossing it out in its entirety. However, the appeals court struck down a provision of the law restricting certain legislative amendments. The court found that the ballot measures had improperly defined what constitutes an amendment, in violation of the state's constitution separation of powers principles. The court severed provisions of Prop 22 that restrict the legislature from making future amendments to the law. The lower court's ruling, made by Alameda County Superior Court Judge Frank Reich in 2021, found the law conflicts with the state constitution by restricting the legislature's ability to regulate workers' compensation rules. The ruling also argues that Prop 22 violates a constitutional provision requiring initiatives to be limited to a single subject. Prop 22 has remained in effect through the appeals process. The Protect App-Based Drivers and Services Coalition, or PADS, which backed Prop 22, celebrated the ruling as a historic victory for nearly 1.4 million drivers who rely on the independence and flexibility of app-based work to earn income and for the integrity of California's initiative system. The appeals court upheld a fundamental policy behind the measure, Molly Whedon, a spokesperson for the coalition, said in an email. So, good news if you're in California. I know in this particular segment of the show we're usually doing bad news, but this is good news if you're in California right now. Good news is that if you need to supplement your income, or you just recently got laid off and you're trying to keep your options open for when, big Silicon Valley comes calling and bringing you back to work, or Silicon Valley Bank comes calling and bringing you back to work, you have the opportunity and the freedom to engage in a couple delivery drives to keep yourself afloat without having to be an employee, without having to go out and, you're still going to have to pay the taxes as an independent contractor, but without having to force an employer to give you insurance and keep you on a rigid schedule and all the other fun crap that comes with being an employee. Good news, you can make your own living. You can be free to work how you see fit. So, that's the good news. Let's look in, speaking of California, on what happened and what the title card of this particular episode is. Reading from the Dissociated Press. Biden issues order to strengthen gun background checks. From the Dissociated Press. From Zeke Miller and Colleen Long. President Brandon signed an executive order on Tuesday aiming at increasing background checks to buy guns, promoting a more secure firearm storage, and ensuring U.S. law enforcement agencies get more out of bipartisan gun control law enacted last summer. The Democrat president was to address his latest efforts to curb gun violence in a speech in the suburban LA community. And of course, the symbology is right there because this is where a gunman stormed a dance hall and shot 20 people, killing 11, following a Lunar New Year celebration in January. He was also meeting with families of victims and the first responders from that day. Biden's rhetoric has grown ever stronger about guns. He routinely calls for banning assault weapons and pushing a vocal gun control platform even tougher than during the Obama admin when he was vice president. He has been emboldened by the midterm elections, when his regular talk of gun control didn't result in a massive loss. Honk honk. And he's expected to continue to argue for strong changes as he inches towards a 2024 re-election run, his aides say. Biden was greeted at the LA airport Tuesday by Brandon Say, the 26-year-old who wrestled with the semi-automatic pistol away from the gunman in Monterey Park. The two shook hands. Biden had invited Say to his State of the Union address in January, where he praised the young man's heroism. But the president has only limited power on guns to go beyond bipartisan legislation passed by Congress last summer, after the killings last year of 10 shoppers at Buffalo, New York grocery store and 19 students and 2 teachers at Uvalde, Texas elementary school. Tuesday's action does not change the U.S. government policy. Rather, it directs federal agencies to ensure compliance with existing laws and procedures, which they should be doing in the first place. That's a typical feature of executive orders issued by a president when they confront the limits of their own power to act within cooperation of the Congress. Biden, in the order, acknowledged Congress's opposition, but said, in the meantime, my admin will continue to do all that we can within existing authority to make our communities safer, man. Come on. The order directs the cabinet to work on a plan to better structure the government to support communities suffering from gun violence. The plan calls on AG Garland to shore up the rules for federally licensed gun dealers so they know they're required to do background checks as part of the license. They know that already. If you are an FFL dealer, you are well aware of the fact that you're required to do background checks for guns. This, I don't know what it is that he's planning on doing with something like this. Biden is also mandating better reporting of ballistics data from federal law enforcement for a clearinghouse that allows federal, state, and local law enforcement to match shell casings to guns. But local and state law enforcement agencies are not required to report ballistics data, and many do not, making the clearinghouse less effective. And the president is asking the Federal Trade Commission to issue a public report analyzing how gun manufacturers market to minors and use military images of market to the general public. President Biden's executive order today is a home run for public safety, said John Feinblatt, president of Everytown for Gun Safety. This is the latest example of President Biden's leadership on gun safety. We're proud to stand with him as he takes robust action to help close the gun seller loophole. What gun seller loophole is there? Which will significantly expand background checks on gun sales, keep weapons out of the hands of dangerous people, and save lives. The bill passed last year, known as the Safer Communities Act, is viewed by gun control advocates as a good start, but one that doesn't go far enough. After the law was signed, there were 11 other mass shootings according to a database of mass killings since 2006, maintained by the Associated Press, and typically involves a lot of drive-bys that don't get reported on the news. These killings don't include shootings in which fewer than 4 people were killed, and gun violence is also rising nationwide. Honk honk, Chicago. Pro-gun groups said the order would do little to stop growing gun violence. The reality is that nothing in the president's executive order today would have done anything to prevent recent mass shootings in California, Michigan, or elsewhere, said Katie Pointer Bainey, who is the managing director of government affairs for the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. It is time for the president and political leaders across the country to have an honest conversation with the American people and acknowledge there's no legislative fix that will permanently solve the issue of gun violence. Biden will also direct his cabinet to make sure law enforcement agencies understand the benefits of the new law, particularly around red flag laws, also known as extreme risk protection orders, which are intended to temporarily remove guns without due process, with potentially violent behavior, and prevent them from hurting themselves or others. With the question always on hand of who decides. The one question that nobody can ever seem to answer is who decides. Last month, the DOJ sent out more than $200 million to help states and the DC administer red flag laws and other crisis intervention programs. So, a lot of this, just from what I read, and I hadn't listened to the speech, I haven't looked at the order before doing this, is absolutely nothing. Literally, it's nothing. And what happens when it's nothing is the fact that this was, for the most part, a symbolic gesture. It was a gesture that came up when, now we've got to have the conversation of what are they trying to pull and what are they trying to advocate for? What are they trying to distract from? Which I'm sure a large amount of that is the banking runs, and they're trying to prevent having bank runs coming up in the near future. And I hate to say that, but that's good. If it's going to come, it's going to come, no matter what. But I know a lot of gun dealers, and I couldn't point to one, even in rural Wisconsin, where a gun dealer would come out and say, you know what, I don't think I need to do a background check for this one, so we're just going to let that one pass. That is a good way to wind your ass up in a jail cell. And they know that. But it gave Biden an opportunity to go back and have a photo op with Brandon Say, the man who wrestled the semi-automatic pistol from the gunman in Monterey Park, and come back out and say, you better do that background check, otherwise there's going to be a problem. But other than that, it doesn't do anything. He's mandating reporting of better ballistics data from federal law enforcement for a clearinghouse, but the people who typically investigate this stuff, the state and local authorities, typically don't share with the Fed. What exactly are you? What was the plan here, other than a photo op? A little bit of one from CBS. Biden issues executive order aimed at reducing gun violence. It's common sense, man. President Biden issued an executive order Tuesday that aims to increase the number of background checks to buy guns, promote better, more secure firearm storage, and ensure U.S. law enforcement agencies are getting the most out of a bipartisan gun control law enacted last summer. The Democrat president discussed his latest efforts at curbing gun violence in a speech from Monterey Park. In January, a gunman stormed a dance hall in the community near L.A. and shot 20 people, killing 11, following a Lunar New Year celebration. And, by the way, fell completely out of the news when we found out that it was an Asian man that was killing other Asian men. The president called the shooting a tragedy that has pierced the soul of this nation. But not enough for us to go back and make it a racial thing. I'm here on behalf of the American people to mourn with you. To pray with you and to let you know that you are loved and not alone, he told the crowd before memorializing each of the victims individually. I'm here with you today to act. Today I'm announcing another executive order that will accelerate and intensify this work to save more lives more quickly. The executive order directs the AG to increase background checks by cracking down on gun sellers who don't perform them when required, with the goal of moving us as close as we can to universal background checks without new legislation. Okay. Let's back up a little bit here and talk about what it is. Now, number one, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to tell you that they're doing versus what they're actually doing. Now, the EO directs the Attorney General to increase background checks by cracking down on gun sellers who don't perform them when required. Which is, I mean, if there's somebody who doesn't do one that's required, that person already lost his license. If he does it and he got caught, he's already lost his license. The FBI does not screw around with that. And I know one of the big goals is universal background checks to make sure that every single firearm that changes hands anytime, no matter what, goes through an FFL dealer. Which means that it goes and gets background checked when they do. That is less about having the background check and more about having the registry, knowing who has what gun when. Which is the idea behind universal background checks. And that does depend on state to state as well. It's also something that Biden can't actually do, either by legislative capacity or by executive capacity. It doesn't work. The 10th Amendment is fairly clear, and the Supreme Court has decided that the states have the right to decide how to regulate their own gun control as they see fit. All the gun control, of course, is unconstitutional, but the states have the rights to regulate as they see fit. In my state, in Wisconsin, as long as I'm selling to another resident in Wisconsin, like the guy with the SpongeBob picture over on Twitter. I know, he's cool, he's based. Wisconsin Neanderthal, I think he is, over on Twitter. If I decide I want to go sell him a firearm, we'll go in, he gives me the agreed amount of money, I hand him the weapon, probably a box of ammo for his trouble, and he goes on his way. But now, like, say I want to go sell to, I know MK is not here, but we'll pick on MK for a little bit right now. Say I want to go MK Ultra, who comes in here from time to time. If I want to go sell to him, then I have to give my firearm to my local FFL dealer, who's actually family, it's somebody that I know, who then goes through the motion. And I don't know what the motion is directly, but he goes through the legal channels of getting it in a box and sending it down via mail courier service to an FFL of MK's choosing down in Illinois, and then he goes through the proper Illinois channels and gets it. So he'll have to go through the background check because it's crossing between state lines. And in fact, I can't sell him one the way that I would sell Wisconsin Neanderthal, because as soon as he crossed lines with it, or crossed state lines with it, and took ownership of it down there, we would both be in violation of federal law, gun trafficking laws, and we would both go to jail for 15 years. Yeah, it's the same thing up here. Thank you, Boulder Vaughn. But also to come back out and promote the use of red flag laws. Again, he can't require a red flag law because that's on a state level. Again, I think red flag laws are stupid. But he can come out and say, hey, come on, man, just go do more of these, man. NBC says Biden seeks to expand background checks. We'll skip this one. But yeah, for the most part, all this was him getting an opportunity to have FaceTime with somebody who they're going to put up as a national hero because, hey, he wrestled a scary semi-automatic pistol away from a gunman, and we can't make it racial right now. So that's where they're at with that. Let's talk about Russia and Ukraine. From the New York Post, U.S. drone, Russian fighter jet collide over Black Sea. From Sam Chamberlain, Ben Kesslin, and Caitlin Dornbos. The U.S. military was forced to take down one of its own drones Tuesday after it collided with a Russian fighter jet over the Black Sea. The MQ-9 Reaper was brought down in international waters after its propeller was struck by one of two Russian Su-27 aircraft that conducted an unsafe and unprofessional intercept. U.S. European Command said in a statement, it's believed to be the first time since the height of the Cold War that an American aircraft crashed as a result of an encounter with a Russian warplane. Several times before the collision, the Su-27s dumped fuel on and flew in front of the MQ-9 in a reckless, environmentally unsound, and unprofessional manner, EUCOM added. So, I don't know what it's like in Russia. But I can tell you here, if you're a fighter pilot in this country, you're generally a pretty cocky one. I mean, it comes with the person. It comes with the territory of handling a $125 million piece of equipment at high rates of speed in the air and being trusted to do so. Plain and simple, you think that your craft doesn't stink and you are the best of the best if you are a fighter pilot in this country. And I have to imagine that it's the same sentiment that happens in Russia. You go there because you have a need for thrill, a need for speed, and a need for that next adrenaline rush. So when you're up there and you're doing that next thing, you see somebody or something rather, because this is an unmanned drone, but you see something up there that may be coming from somebody who is adversarial to you, yeah, you're going to screw with it. The incident demonstrates a lack of competence in addition to being unsafe and unprofessional. Russia's fuel dumping tactic, in an apparent attempt to blind or damage the drone, is rarely seen. The pilots may have aimed to set the Reaper aflame with a dump and burn, intentionally dumping and igniting fuel with the plane's afterburner, but the practice is not commonly used for offensive purposes. Defense officials declined to say what they believed was Moscow's intent with the maneuver. You're flying over international airspace, adjacent to a war zone, in which the president of the nation, who owns the 2 fighter jets, has called you an intervening force with a war that's going on near the country that you're flying near. I know what their intent was. It was to screw with the Americans. Whether by reality or propaganda. I don't even have to ask the pilots to know what their intent was. You know why? Because if I had a $125 million piece of equipment, I'd be doing the same thing if a Russian drone got too close to this country. And so would just about anybody in the Navy and Air Force that flies a jet. Just so you know. I certainly don't want to speak for the Russian pilots, but it is clear that their actions were unprofessional and outside the norms of international accepted practice. Pentagon spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Garn told the Post. While the Reaper can be armed, Pentagon spokesperson Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder said the drone was conducting a standard intelligence surveillance and reconnaissance mission over the Black Sea. And then, for those of you who are geographically challenged, as are most libertarians, they show you where the Black Sea is. These aircraft have been flying over the Black Sea region for some time, to include before the current Ukraine conflict started, he said. It is an important and busy international waterway. Air Force General James B. Hecker, the commander of U.S. air operations in Europe and Africa, claimed the Russia jet's actions nearly caused both aircraft to crash. Ryder said the Su-27 was likely damaged in the collision, but managed to land safely soon after. Back in D.C., the State Department summoned the Russian ambassador, Anatoly Antonev, to lodge a protest over the incident, though Ryder said U.S. military officials had not, to my knowledge, spoken to their Russian counterparts about the encounter. The collision took place just after 0700 local time and follows a pattern of dangerous actions by Russian pilots while interacting with U.S. and Allied aircraft over international airspace, including over the Black Sea, according to EUCOM. Ryder said Russian pilots harassed the drone for between 30 and 40 minutes before it went down. Neither the U.S. nor Russia had recovered the drone as of Tuesday, and Ryder would not say whether any attempt at a recovery would take place. Well, if you don't do it, they will. President Biden was briefed on the incident by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, a White House spokesperson said on Tuesday, after which he promptly forgot about it and went back to go eat his bran muffin. John Kirby told reporters that while the incident was not the first time U.S. aircraft have been intercepted by Russian jets, it is the first time the intercept resulted in a splashing of one of our drones. So, that is what they're saying with that, and I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know why we're flying over in that region. Again, unless there is some intent somewhere to go back and try to antagonize. Let's grab one from our friends over at NPR. Russian fighter jets forces down U.S. military drone over Black Sea. U.S. says this is from Greg Meyer and Charles Maines. And remember, NPR did have to lay off 10% of its staff, so Your taxpayer subsidies are not doing enough for it, and they need our money, comrade. That's right, hit that donate button, because it's not your money, it's our money. And make sure that NPR can tell you that Russia man bad, Orange man is bad, and Biden man and Zelensky man are good. That's right. Those are the only acceptable positions that you can take, and NPR will tell you with a donation of your own money, which translates to our money because it's all communal, and they are National Progressive Radio, never printing reality. Let's see what they have to say. Boulder Vaughn says that mid-air collisions are more common than generally reported, which is definitely a possibility. I think most of us have never heard of a sea battle or a naval battle, but they seem to happen all the time in Clancy novels, which tells me that a lot of those also don't make front page news. Excuse me. Let's read what they have to say here, though. The U.S. military says a Russian fighter plane clipped the propeller of an American MQ-9 Reaper drone, forcing it to crash in the Black Sea. Russia offered a very different account, claiming American drone crashed on its own. I did not touch it. It just got down. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. What's not in dispute is the inflammatory nature of the incident, which comes at a time when Russia-U.S. tensions are already running high over the war in the Ukraine. The U.S. military says 2 Russian Su-27 fighter jets carried out a reckless intercept of the American drone, which was carrying out a routine reconnaissance mission in international airspace over the Black Sea. The Russian jets initially flew just in front of the much slower American drone several times and dumped fuel on the U.S. aircraft as well. After about 30 minutes of these harassing actions, one of the Russian jets clipped the propeller of the drone, causing it to crash, the military said. Intercepts of aircraft are not uncommon, just wanting to see what's there, said Pentagon spokesman Brigadier General Pat Ryder. In this particular case, the Russian jet collided with the U.S. aircraft, damaging the propeller and essentially putting it in a situation where it was unflyable, uncontrollable, so we brought it down. And by the way, that's a couple $1 million of U.S. taxpayer money that they just took down. Ryder said the drone was well away from Ukrainian territory, but did not give an exact location. He declined to speak about U.S. efforts to retrieve the aircraft, but noted that Russia had not recovered it. Alright, let's grab one from Politico, talking about the diplomatic side of this. Russian jet's collision with U.S. drone sparks diplomatic flurry. From Nahal Tusi and Lawrence Eukenye. A diplomatic row kicked off Tuesday after a Russian fighter jet harassed and then bumped a U.S. surveillance drone over the Black Sea, forcing U.S. pilots to ditch the uncrewed aircraft in the water. The collision added to the U.S.-Russian tensions that have already soared over the war in Ukraine. In the wake of the downing, the State Department summoned the Russian ambassador in Washington, Anatoly Antonov, a department spokesperson who was not authorized to speak on the record because of Department Customs, said on Tuesday afternoon that Antonov met with Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs Karen Donfried to discuss Russia's unsafe and unprofessional operations over the Black Sea, which resulted in the downing today of an unmanned U.S. aircraft. Department spokesperson Ned Price said earlier that this admin was briefing allies and partners on the collision and was in touch with Russian officials about it as well. U.S. Ambassador in Moscow, Lynn Tracy, has voiced concerns to the Russian Foreign Ministry, Price said. In fact, this unsafe and unprofessional act by the Russians nearly caused both aircraft to crash, said Air Force General James Hecker, commander of U.S. Air Forces Europe. U.S. and allied aircraft will continue to operate in the international airspace, and we call on the Russians to conduct themselves professionally and safety. The statement added that the episode over the Black Sea also follows a pattern of dangerous actions involving U.S. and allied aircraft and the Russian planes. Oh, I'm sorry, that was more than 2 million. That's roughly 14 million. A senior diplomat in Eastern Europe, who was granted anonymity due to the sensitivity of the issue, said the officials were concerned, as it shows the aggressiveness of the Russian conduct, and this again shows the importance of the Black Sea and the need to have an approach on it for medium and long term. A lot of anonymity with this. Now, again, a lot of this has to do with classified information, so do take that with a grain of salt, but also remember the fact that we can't verify the credentials of any of these people. So that's what happened with the Russian planes. I think a lot of this, again, is mostly saber rattling. I don't think this is going to go anywhere just yet. There may be some talk now, especially with our Biden-loving friends and the people who agitate them, like Jersey, my wife's son Reliant, over the need to go back to the Ukraine and make this a central focus of everything that we do. Whether or not they will follow through or go any further than that, I can't say. Let's talk about banking. Another bank is having issues, has not collapsed yet, but is having issues, from CNN. Credit Suisse finds material weakness in its financial reporting and scraps executive bonuses, from Hannah Ziadi. Credit Suisse acknowledged the material weakness in its financial reporting Tuesday as it scrapped bonuses for top executives in the wake of the bank's worst annual performance since the global financial crisis. The embattled Swiss lender also said Chairman Axel Lehmann had proposed a voluntary waive, a share award worth 1.5 million francs or $1.6 million for the 2022 to 2023 financial year given the firm's poor financial performance. Credit Suisse said its annual report that it had found the group's internal control over financial reporting was not effective because it had failed to adequately identify potential risks to financial statements. The revelations come just days after the bank delayed the publication of the annual report after an 11th-hour query from the U.S. SEC over cash flow statements for 2019 and 2020, which basically meant that they didn't want this story to drop on the same day that the bank run was potentially going to happen, or possibly on Friday. It's not clear over whether or not it happened on Friday or Monday. But regardless, either way, the SEC did not want this to drop while we're in the middle of another banking crisis. The board concluded that the material weaknesses could result in misstatements of account balances or disclosures that would result in a material misstatement to the annual financial statements of Credit Suisse. The annual report said Credit Suisse is urgently developing a remediation plan to strengthen controls. The bank stock fell more than 3% but recovered as European markets steadied up to trade up 0.7% by 9 a.m. Eastern Time. It had fallen to a new record low Monday as the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in the U.S. scared investors and pummeled banking stocks around the world. So, they're not crashing, they're not going down, but they are showing weakness in its financial reporting, and they are shoring up. So, it's not bank run time yet, which again, as I said on Twitter the other day, bank running is probably not completely advised at this point, simply based on the fact that almost all of our assets for people who are watching this program are secured by the FDIC. But I would be paying real close attention to what your employer does and where they go and who they bank with. Because again, as a person who's had to go through it before, I'm not in such a bad position now. Whereas if one paycheck did manage to not go because of a run on my bank or a run on my employer's bank or anything like that, I'm not in such a dire position where one missed paycheck would absolutely kill me. But it would still suck, and as inflation goes further and further, there are a lot of people out there who would be absolutely financially destroyed by one missed paycheck. So, it's something to pay attention to, definitely. Meanwhile, looking at SVB, regulators are taking a harder look at those insider stock sales by SVB execs. From Connie Loizos. The Justice Department and SEC are investigating the stock sales that officers of Silicon Valley Bank made days before the bank failed, according to both the WSJ and New York Times, a former newspaper. The probes are reportedly in their preliminary phase. Both outlets note that it's only common to investigate prearranged stock selling plans when the sales take place shortly before releasing news that could have an adverse effect on the company's share price. The agencies apparently focus, for now, on securities filings that show the bank's CEO of 12 years, Greg Becker, and its CFO, Daniel Beck, who joined the outfit nearly 6 years ago from the Bank of the West, sold shares 2 weeks ago ahead of the bank's abrupt collapse. Becker exercised options on 12,451 shares on February 27th and sold them the same day, netting roughly $3 million. Beck sold roughly a third of his holdings in the company, $575,000 worth of shares on the same day. The sales were conducted via 10b5-1 plans, which allow insiders of publicly traded corporations to set up a trading plan for selling stocks they own by establishing a predetermined number of shares to be sold at a predetermined time. The laws around such plans, established by the SEC in 2000, are intended to keep insiders from unfairly profiting from important corporate information that was not yet public. While the probes may not lead to allegations of insider trading, one possible problem for both Becker and Beck ties to the proposed capital raise that SVB announced last Wednesday, the same release that set investors on edge, leading many to begin moving their money out of the bank. As Dan Taylor, a Wharton professor who studies corporate trading disclosures, told Bloomberg, which is Ron Helton's favorite publication by his favorite politician, last week. While Becker may not have anticipated the bank run on January 26 when he adopted the plan, the capital raise is material. If they were in discussions for a capital raise at the time their stock sale plans were adopted, that's highly problematic. Becker was also made at least one appearance between the time that plans for a stock sale were put in place and the bank's implosion. So, and I mean, you knew it was going to get investigated. Partially because I'm sure the federal government is interested to make sure that their woke little pet project, and a pet project, by the way, that is probably holding a lot of their investors' cash, is not doing anything on the down low or something that could get tied back to any of them. From CNBC, Moody's cuts outlook on U.S. banking system to negative, citing rapidly deteriorating operating environment. From Jeff Cox. In a harsh blow to an already reeling sector, Moody's Investor Services cut its view on the entire banking system to negative from stable. The firm, part of the Big Three rating services, said Monday it was making the move in light of key bank failures, that prompted regulators to step in Sunday with a dramatic rescue plan for depositors and other institutions impacted by the crisis. We've changed to negative from stable our outlook on the U.S. banking system to reflect rapid deterioration in the operating environment following deposit runs at Silicon Valley Bank, Silvergate Bank, and Signature Bank, and the failures of SVB and SNY, Moody's said in a report. The move followed action late Monday when Moody's warned it was either downgrading or placing on review for downgrade several individual institutions. The moves are important because they could impact credit ratings and thus borrowing costs for the sector. In its downgrade of the entire sector, the rating agency noted the extraordinary actions taken to shore up the impacted banks, but said that other institutions with unrealized losses or uninsured depositors could still be at risk. The Federal Reserve established a facility to ensure the institutions hit with liquidity problems would have access to cash. The Treasury Department backstopped the program with $25 billion in funds, and vowed that depositors with more than $250,000 at SVB and Signature would have full access to their funds. But Moody's said the concerns remain. Banks with substantial unrealized securities losses and with non-retail and uninsured U.S. depositors may still be more sensitive to depositor competition or ultimate flight, with adverse effects on funding, liquidity, earnings, and capital, the report said. Bank stocks rallied strongly despite the downgrade. The SPDR Bank Exchange Traded Fund rose nearly 6.5% in morning trade. Major indices also were higher, with the Dow up nearly 450 points or 1.4%. So it hasn't had an effect yet, but everything is either holding flat or slightly down in this sector and in the market in the whole. So we will see what happens. Speaking of SVB, FDIC names Tim Mayopoulos as CEO of Silicon Valley Bank. This is just coming from Reuters. No author given. The FDIC on Monday named Tim Mayopoulos as Chief Executive Officer of Silicon Valley Bank, a subsidiary of the defunct SVB Financial Group. Mayopoulos steps in after regulators shuttered the startup-focused lender on Friday after a run on its deposits that left it with a dearth of capital. The regulator has also transferred all deposits, both insured and uninsured, and substantially all assets of the bank to a newly created bridge bank. So they have a new CEO, and he has something he wants to tell you. SVB's new CEO urges clients to help us rebuild our deposits. From Rohan Goswami. SVB's new leader told clients in a Tuesday message that the seized bank was open for business and ready to receive and hold customer deposits, a call for venture capital firms and other tech customers to come back home. If you, your portfolio companies, or your firm moved funds within the past week, please consider moving some of them back as part of a secure deposit diversification strategy, wrote Tim Mayopoulos, who was appointed by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation as CEO of the bank, now called Silicon Valley Bridge Bank. In an email to clients that was also posted on SVB's website, Mayopoulos told the bank's client base that depositors will have full access to the money, adding that both fresh inflows and existing deposits were fully protected by the FDIC. The number one thing you can do to support the future of this institution is to help us rebuild our deposit base, both by leaving deposits with Silicon Valley Bridge Bank and transferring back deposits that left over the last several days, Mayopoulos wrote. I'm not doing that. Now, mind you, I never had any money in Silicon Valley Bank, but I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I'm not doing that. I ain't doing that crap. Over $40 billion in deposits exited SVB last week as startups and venture funds fled the failing institution just after a mid-quarter report that showed it had sold $21 billion worth of securities at a loss. SVB's failure was the second largest ever for a U.S. bank behind the 2008 collapse of Washington Mutual. Federal regulators intervened over the weekend, guaranteeing that depositors would not suffer losses as the contagion threatened to spread to other banks. In the post, Mayopoulos did specify a limit on FDIC protection in line with federal regulators' comments that the backstop would be structured in a manner that fully protects all depositors. The FDIC is only mandated to insure $250,000 worth of deposits per customer. Which is interesting, and honestly, and again, I bring up the fact. Now, there are a lot of people in this bank who had a lot of money in their savings, in their checking. I mean, this is a Silicon Valley business bank, or based bank rather. So they're handling millions, if not billions of dollars at a time, just for payroll, on top of any other assets, any other mortgages or securities that are held by this bank. In short, there's a lot of money that's going into this bank to handle the depositors. And yes, they're probably right. Anybody, even if it is just Nana bringing over her deposit, her checking account or her savings account back over there, or bringing a savings account back in with $450 in it so she can write a $20 check to the grandkids for their birthday. Even if it is just that, at this point, that is still a situation where these people are going to be protected. Or again, if it's some millionaire who has a large amount of cash that he wants to go put into the bank so it gets held somewhere, that's probably going to be backed up as well. But I don't know where you're going to find investors for this, because, I mean, how many investors just lost their ass on this? And they're not getting anything back. The investors aren't getting crap. The depositors are, but that's not going to be enough to hold this back up. Unless they go on the very, very simplified model of banking, which is the money that gets lent out is the money that gets deposited, with the interest coming from the money that gets lent out, mostly going to the money that got put in for deposit as a savings account, with a little bit off the top to go covering operating expenses. But what have we seen? And part of the reason that we're here, and part of the reason what we're seeing is once you bring investors in and once you have a lot of money out there that can go out and work for everybody else because it's going into the markets and, you know, it's buying stock and it's taking risky investment chances. Would you put your money in this bank? I wouldn't. From the New York Post. No safer place for deposits than Silicon Valley Bank, new CEO says. That's because it's completely nationalized by this point, with no private buyer in sight. From The Hill. Here's who is paying to restore Silicon Valley signature bank deposits. Well, that would be you and I. From Tobias Burns. The federal government mobilized immediately in response to the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, working over the weekend to ensure depositors who had more than $200 billion of venture capital and high-tech startup money stored in the two banks. But unlike the 2008 financial crisis, during which Congress passed new legislation in order to salvage the country's largest banks, the current rescue plan is smaller in scale, pertains only to two banks, and isn't additional taxpayer money. For now. In order to make sure depositors can still withdraw funds from their accounts, the vast majority of which exceeded the $250,000 limit for standard insurance from the FDIC, regulators say they're pulling from a special fund maintained by the FDIC called the Depositors Insurance Fund. I could make so many jokes about this. Add life in that. Depositors Insurance Life Fund. It'll make the acronym so much funnier. For the two banks that were put into the receivership, the FDIC will use funds from the Deposit Insurance Fund to ensure that all the depositors are made whole, a Treasury official told reporters on Sunday. In that case, the depositor insurance funded is bearing the risk. This is not funds from the taxpayer. Oh, but it is. The money in the DILF comes from the insurance premiums that banks are required to pay into, as well as the interest earned on funds invested in U.S. bonds and other securities and obligations. This is why the term, some observers have been saying the term bailout shouldn't be used in reference to the current government intervention. No, that's not the reason they're saying don't say bailout. The reason they're saying don't say bailout is because that is a charge term that will lead to a bank run. And this is still a bailout. Because it's banks' money plus interest that's being used to insure depositors, and it's only being administered by the federal government. But standing behind the DIF is the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, according to the FDIC, meaning that if the DIF runs out of money or encounters a problem, the Treasury could call on the taxpayers as the next resort. Your soul, please. This is not an impossibility. Oh shit, Sherlock. The DIF had a $125 billion balance as of last quarter of 2022, and the SVB reported a $212 billion in assets in the same quarter. Treasury officials sounded confident on Sunday the money in the DIF would be more than enough to cover SVB's deposit. Okay. Tell me more. Like, did he have a car? To settle fears of a potential shortfall, the Federal Reserve announced an additional line of credit known as the Bank Term Funding Program, offering loans of up to 1 year to banks, credit unions, and other types of depository institutions. For collateral, the Fed will take U.S. bonds and mortgage-backed securities, and the line of credit could be backed by up to $25 billion from the Treasury's $38 billion Exchange Stabilization Fund. which again goes back into the reason that we're in this problem in the first place. Both of these steps are likely to increase confidence among depositors, though they stop short on an FDIC guaranteed of uninsured accounts, as was implemented in '08, analysts for Goldman Sachs wrote in a Sunday note to investors. So, long story short, no, we are going to be on the hook for this eventually. Some good news, especially for a person who is in an attempt to buy a piece of property right now. From CNBC, mortgage rates tumble in the wake of bank failures. From Diane Olick. By the way, this is going to overheat the inflation again. As you start to get a run-up on houses, which is most people's major asset, and people again come out to be flush with cash and go start spending it out in the markets. The average rate on the popular 30-year fixed dropped to 6.5% on Monday, according to Mortgage Daily News, which is still outrageous, by the way. That's down from a rate of 6.76 on Friday, and a recent high of 7.05 last Wednesday. Mortgage rates loosely follow the yield on the 10-year Treasury, which fell to a one-month low in response to the failures of Silicon Valley and Signature Bank and the ensuing ripple through the nation's banking sector. In real terms, for a buyer looking at a $500,000 home with a 20% down on a 30-year fixed, the payment this week is $128 less than it was last week. It's still, however, higher than it was in January. And a reminder that even with the inflated house prices, that's still higher than it was in January of 2020. That's the part they won't tell you. What does this mean for the spring housing market? In October, rates surged over 7%, and that started a real slowdown in home sales. While rates then started falling in December and were near 6% by the end of January. That caused a surprising 8% monthly jump in pending home sales, which is the National Association of Realtors' measure of signed contracts on existing homes. Sales of newly built homes, which the Census Bureau measured by signed contracts, also surged far higher than expected. While the numbers for February are not in yet, anecdotally, agents and builders have said sales took a big step back in February as rates shot higher. So if rates continue to drop now, buyers could return once again, but that's a big if. This mini banking crisis has to drive change in consumer behavior in order to have a lasting positive impact on rates. It's still about inflation, said Matthew Graham, Chief Operating Officer at Mortgage News Daily. Markets now have to contend with the inflationary impact of consumer fear, he added, noting that Tuesday brings a fresh consumer price index report and a monthly measure of inflation in the economy. As recently as last week, Jerome Powell told members of Congress that the latest economic data has come in stronger than expected. Well, we'll see, because driving the market right now is fear, and with the banks starting to go, even if people are still buying bank stock at this point, I would still look at this and say that there are a lot of people who don't want to go back in and jump into a 30-year fixed on a bank that may not be there tomorrow. So take this with a grain of salt. We'll see what happens with this as we go. From the Blaze. Barney Frank, architect of Dodd-Frank, pushes back on Democrats blaming Trump for a bank collapse. And this is a mass Democrat, keep in mind. From Chris Enlow. Democrats, including President Brandon and Elizabeth Warren, are blaming Trump for the sudden collapse of two banks, Silicon Valley and Signature Bank. But Barney Frank, leading sponsor of the Dodd-Frank Act, sharply disagrees. The law, signed by then-President Obama in 2010, made significant changes to Wall Street regulations and federal financial regulatory agencies in the aftermath of the financial meltdown in '08. The bill, though controversial, was theoretically designed to protect Americans. Bullshit. Democrats say Trump is responsible because he signed a law rolling back some of the regulations enacted by Dodd-Frank. Biden. During the Obama-Biden administration, And I have to say Obama Biden now because I keep saying Biden Harris and people keep saying it's not normal, so I have to normalize putting the vice president in. We put in place tough requirements to make sure the crisis we saw in 08 would not happen again. Unfortunately, the last guy, he rolled back some of those requirements. Warren. In 2018, the big banks won. With support from both parties, President Trump signed into law to roll back critical parts of the Dodd-Frank regulations. Husband, would you like a beer? It's true that Trump signed the law, but what Biden and Warren failed to mention is that rolling back the regulations had widespread bipartisan support. In fact, 17 Senate Democrats and 33 House Democrats supported the bill, demonstrating that it was hardly a one-sided effort. In an interview with Politico, Frank said he doesn't think the 2018 rollback had any impact on the failure of the banks. That's right, because it's now 2023. It is now a full 5 years later. And these banks stayed solvent when the market hit 17,000 on the Dow. I don't think that it had any impact, Frank said. They hadn't stopped examining banks. Frank is no partial analyst. After all, he sat on the board of the New York-based Signature Bank until Sunday, when it was shut down. But his perspective is strengthened by the fact that he does not believe the rollback of regulations he helped craft contributed to the rapid downfall of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Frank, who served on Signature's board since 2015, said the bank was in good shape, but was hit by a run generated by the nervousness and beyond nervousness from SVB and crypto. The bank's digital assets business made it the unfortunate victim of a panic that really goes back to FTX, the crypto exchange that failed last year. I think if it hadn't been for FTX and the extreme nervousness about crypto, that this wouldn't have happened, even SVB or to us, Frank explained. And that wasn't something that could have been anticipated by regulators. I think that was a stretch. I think there were a few people that were in on FTX, and I don't necessarily believe that that was as organic of a rise and fall as many people tried to make us believe that it is. I think it was problematic, absolutely. But I don't necessarily think that that was the be-all, end-all that so many people try to make it out to be. Alright, what else do we have? From CNBC. Chuck U. Schumer will give campaign donations from Silicon Valley Bank's ex-CEO PAC to charity. Why? You already have them. Now, if you were giving them back to Silicon Valley Bank to go back and try to make their depositors whole again, I would look at this and say, this is a noble thing to do. And I would say, Chuck U. Schumer, I make fun of you all the time, but this was a good idea. Instead, I'm going to look at this and say, you are virtue signaling, and you're going to come out, and I haven't read the article yet, but I almost guarantee it's, well, we cannot have donations from people like this in our hands because it shows a stigma, and we cannot take support from people like this. Bet me, as we sit down and watch this. Bet me. From Chelsea Cox and Brian Schwartz. Senate Majority Leader Chuck U. Schumer will give campaign donations from former Silicon Valley Bank CEO Greg Becker and the bank's PAC to charities, according to a person with direct knowledge of the matter. The New York Democrat received the maximum individual contribution of $5,800 from Becker in June 2021. According to the FEC, the campaign received $2,700 from the bank's Political Action Committee in 2015 per an FEC filing. I guarantee you it was more than that. The New York Democrat plans to send contributions to New York-based charities, according to the person who declined to be named. Again, why? What does this do? Other than give you a massive virtue signal. Maxine Waters, also on the train, says she will return the contribution she received from Becker, according to reporting from Politico. See, that actually does something. I don't have a lot of love lost for Maxine Waters, but that actually does something. That actually accomplishes something. And now, of course, you can take, and it's only $2,700. But you can actually take that money and give it back to partially one of the account holders, or put it in the fund that the FDIC is actually using to do this. It's actually accomplishing something. When you're giving it out to charity, as much as I love giving it out to charity, when you're... I advocate for as many people as humanly possible to give to charity. You guys know that. I sat in this chair for 24 hours one day to raise awareness and money for suicide prevention. But Chuck Schumer is not doing this because he's a regular advocate for these charities. He's doing it because, just like I said, he's sitting in a position where he cannot be tied with money from this bank. Maxine Waters is actually doing something where this can go. Honestly, and I don't know if there's a nonprofit or a charity to help people out who were destroyed by this particular banking crash. I doubt it, because most of them are rich and it's California already. But even giving it to a charity that helps people trying to get through, or employees who are disaffected by the fact that their payroll was run through SVB, even that would be a better use of this money than sending it out to New York charities. Chuck Schumer is virtue signaling. A representative from Mark Warner, who received $2,900 contribution to his campaign from Becker, did not respond to a request for comment. Well, yeah, that's because he's saying screw you and keeping the money in his bank. He's not laughing. He's laughing about it, but he's not being stupid about it. From the New York Post. SVB, Signature, and Credit Suisse donated $1.2 million to Dems since 2017, which raises the question now. How many of them are going to give that money back? Whether to be like Schumer and virtue signal and give it to charity, or to actually give it back to these companies so they can pay out their deposits. Yeah, your live marathon was epic. Well, thank you. I want to do it again, but we gotta rebuild the audience after the move and after the time switch. It is like switching times that I stream for. That has just absolutely battered my audience participation, because there's a lot more that's going on at this time of day. Unfortunately, now I have to be at work at 0700 in the morning, which means I can't come out and put on a 2-hour live stream at 7:30 in the morning. And I'm trying to recover, I really am, and I'm trying to stay consistent so people know when they can find me. From Josh Christensen. Struggling Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and Credit Suisse bet big on Democrat candidates over the past 3 election cycles, according to a Post review of fundraising data. The banks, through their employees and affiliated PACs, donated nearly $1.2 million to Democrats between 2017 and 2022, according to the government transparency group Open Secrets. Republican candidates got less than $750,000 over the same period. All 3 banks spent big to defeat President Trump in 2020, collectively giving $198,926 to Biden's individual presidential campaign. And they say you can't buy a politician. And look at that! They bought a president, and now he's bailing them out. But he's not calling it a bailout. Well, we'll see if, like I say, if they virtue signal and they give it back. Alright, so that's what we have in the banking sector. We've actually got our 3 big stories done. but let's talk a bit more about what's going on here. I've got one, because spring break is coming up, and then we will do government officials behaving badly. Something we missed for the last couple days, ironically enough. From the Daily Mail online. Not down in Acapulco, thousands heed warning to avoid Mexico as spring breakers descend on Florida beaches. As Miami is set for record arrivals, but some brave partygoers still make the annual pilgrimage south. Well, you're taking your life in your own hands, and I mean, what is life without a little bit of risk? You won't catch me doing it. I'm a little bit too old for spring break in Acapulco anyway, but yeah, you won't catch me doing it. If that's the level of risk that you want to accept, well, I wish you well. I wish you Godspeed. I hope that nothing but the best happens for you, but, you know. From Alex Oliveira. Spring breakers appear to be heeding the warnings of American authorities who caution against traveling to Mexico amid heightened fears of cartel violence against foreigners. Part of this is propagandistic too, by the way. I want to put this out there. Anytime you go into Mexico, no matter what, you're putting your life in your own hands. But as far as this goes, the resort towns, Acapulco, Baja, what's the other big one? Cancun, no, not Cancun. Yeah, Cancun. Quintana Roo. I mean, those are pretty much at this point safe havens. There is a little bit of risk again by using Mexico and things that happen in Mexico, but it's not like trying to smuggle yourself across the border or going into the ghetto towns or places people are trying to flee from. These are places that are built on American tourism and the fact that they can offer tourism for so much cheaper than everywhere else in the continental United States. Because their economy is so bad, they can pay their workers slave wages to give you the time of your life. And there is some propaganda as well, based on the fact that there are tensions between the US and Mexico right now. Spring breakers appear to be heeding the warnings of American authorities who caution against traveling to Mexico amid heightened fears of cartel violence against foreigners. Across Florida, college kids clad in bathing suits and bikinis could be seen frolicking on local beaches, splashing in the water while drinking and partying in the sun. Miami Beach has attracted a particularly large scene, with photos showing the party overflowing from the shoreline into nearby bars and restaurants. Airport officials said they expected to see record numbers of arrivals of about 550 flights carrying 100,000 people in and out daily, according to Fox 13. Well, also consider the fact that, it was at the tail end at this point last year, but there was still a lot of fear about the pinko pox at this point last year. We didn't really get to the end of the fear until June, July of last year. So, a lot of people pent up, a lot of people going out there on their first shot at doing something like this, and a lot of people really coming of age, getting to vacation for the first time as well. The U.S. government has designated almost every state in Mexico a travel risk, with many being labeled as do not travel or reconsider travel. Nevertheless, some spring breakers have begun descending on Cancun, where they could be seen frolicking at oceanside music festivals. The resort city is located in the Mexican state of Quintana Roo, where the U.S. has advised travelers to exercise increased caution. And there we've got the map, with pretty much only Yucatan and Campeche being exercise normal precautions, which there should have been a precaution anyway. But Baja and Baja California Sur, well, California Sur is increased caution, Baja is reconsidered travel, probably because of the people that are waiting to get into California across the border, Sonora, Chihuahua. Surprisingly enough, Coahuila and Nuevo Leon are places that are still just exercise increased caution, where, like, the Donna facility is over here. So I would maybe not Coahuila rather, but Nuevo Leon I would think to be either in reconsider or do not travel land, if Tamaulipas is in do not travel land. But hey, they're going to keep going to Quintana Roo. Where's Quintana Roo? I don't even know. Oh, down there. Next to Yucatan and Campeche. Roatan is a tropical island off Honduras that's totally safe and cheaper. I can't tell if that is sarcasm or not, by the way, Boulder Vaughn. Because it's off Haiti. Or Honduras, rather. And Honduras seems to be a little bit sketchy. The travel advisories come as the dangers facing Americans in Mexico received increased attention after a group of 4 were kidnapped by a drug cartel in a saga that left 2 of the victims dead. There is more to that story, I guarantee, than what we got out of the news. Drug cartel violence and other criminal activity represent a significant safety threat to anyone who crosses into Mexico right now, said Texas Department of Public Safety Director Stephen McCraw in a statement issued on Friday. Look, here's my assessment. Once again, stick to the resorts. They have a lot of money on hand to make sure that you stay safe when you go there. So stick to those resorts. Don't go to other places that you wouldn't normally go, that you've never heard of before. Just go to the big ones. But also, again, always look, especially if you're going into a foreign country, always consider the fact that you may not see home if you go down there. Just like any other time you go to a foreign country. Or Chicago. Alright, let's do some government officials behaving badly. More on the Donald saga. Trump will not appear before a grand jury probing hush money payment, lawyer says. Well, good. That's probably the smartest thing that he's done since his presidency ended. From Adam Rice and Rose Horowitz. Former President Trump will not appear before the New York City grand jury investigating a hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels during his 2016 presidential campaign, Trump attorney Joe Tacopina said on Monday. Go for some tacos. Trump's legal team met with former president in Florida over the weekend. After discussions, Trump decided not to sit for a meeting with the grand jury in Manhattan. The Manhattan DA's office convened the grand jury to look into payments to Daniels, who alleges she slept with Trump before he became the president. Yeah, well, so does E. Jean Carroll, and yet I've yet to see any evidence of that. NBC News reported Thursday that Trump had been invited to testify before the grand jury. The DA's office has declined to comment on the matter. Tacopina said Friday that Trump's attorneys have no plans to meet with the district attorney's office. You know why? Because you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say or do can and will be used against you in a court of law. You should exercise that right. Even if, and this has always been my stance, if you guys remember the Rittenhouse coverage, which I did right here in this chair, a different background of course, but right here in this chair, when I did the Rittenhouse coverage, that was probably one of the first things that I said was he shouldn't be testifying for himself. Now, it turned out well for him, but he still probably shouldn't have done it. If the government has a case against you, they can make it without your help. Plain and simple. Never give them an opportunity to try to catch you in a perjury or throw another charge up on the top of it. Which of course is what this invitation is for. They want to get him to go back and testify in his own defense so they can go try to do notes and say, oh, look, here's something where he said absolutely guaranteed when it was only likely probable. That's perjury because we had him under oath. Never go and give the government something that they can use against you. From the Daily Wire, speaking of Mexico, all Democrats on Homeland Security Committee pull out from attending hearing in field on border crisis. Interesting, from Ryan Saavedra. House Homeland Security Committee Chairman Mark Green said in a statement Monday that all Democrats on the committee are pulling out from attending a hearing in the field about President Biden's ongoing crisis at the U.S. southern border. The news comes as the admin has been seen a historic flood of millions of illegal immigrants pouring into the U.S. under its watch, which is largely occurring because Biden's policies are acting as magnets for the migrants and cartel smugglers. The New York Times, a former newspaper, reported last year that Mexican drug cartels went from making $500 million a year from human smuggling in 2018 to making $13 billion with a B from human smuggling in 2022, a 2,500% increase. It's deeply disappointing that minority members of the committee have chosen to bail on this week's full committee field hearings in Texas, only after they invited and confirmed a minority witness for one of the panels, Green said in a statement. The only message their absence sends is that they're uninterested in coming to the table to have a conversation about the devastation that this border crisis is having on Americans and their communities across the country. We will continue to encourage our Democrat colleagues to get out of the D.C. echo chamber and meet with Americans where they're to discuss the biggest issues facing them. Ranking member Benny Thompson claimed that Democrats will not participate because it had become clear that Republicans plan to politicize this event from the start. Instead of a fact-finding mission to develop a better border security and immigration policies, Republicans are traveling to the border to attack the admin and try to score political points in the extreme rhetoric. Thompson falsely claimed, "Committee Democrats are in regular contact with department leadership and stakeholders in the ground, and we will be taking substantive site visits on the border, including as soon as this week." I mean, it would be a show of good faith no matter what, to go back in there and join them and make them put their money where their mouth is. Give the cameras an opportunity to catch them saying nasty stuff and politicizing it, if you believe that's what they're going to do. From Fox News, Maryland Democrats' bill would block people under 25 from being charged with felony murder, which is good in my eyes, because then we can come out and definitively say that they are not full adults and they don't need to be voting. Also, by the way, we don't need to be lowering the voting age. This right here, the fact that this bill exists, even if it didn't get signed into law, is the definitive marker that we do not need to be letting 18-year-olds vote, 21-year-olds vote, or 16-year-olds vote. From Aaron Kliegman. Maryland Democrats are pushing a bill in the state legislature that would prevent anyone under the age of 25 from being charged with felony murder. Democratic delegate Charlotte Crutchfield introduced into the Maryland General Assembly the Youth Accountability and Safety Act, which would prohibit a person younger than 25 at the time of the offense from being convicted of first-degree murder under the state's felony murder provisions. Under those provisions, murder is classified as being in the first degree if it was committed during the perpetration or attempted perpetration of several specified crimes, such as rape, arson, robbery, burglary, carjacking, or other serious offense. But with Crutchfield's proposal, which has the support of several Democrat co-sponsors, anyone under 25 who murders someone while trying to commit one of these other crimes couldn't be charged with first degree, a crime that Maryland carries life imprisonment with or without the possibility of parole. Now, oddly enough, they don't give a reason as to why they want to come back out and do this. They don't tell you why they want to come back out and make sure that these kids can't get charged with this. But I'd be willing to bet that it's these poor kids, they don't know what they're doing just yet, but let's totally make sure they can vote and change the lives of 330 million people. From the Hill, Biden says Carter asked him to do his eulogy. From Alex Gangatano, well, the oldest living government official, the oldest living president is now asking the second oldest living president to do his eulogy. President Biden said Monday that former President Carter, who is in hospice care, has asked him to deliver his eulogy when he dies. So he's done the eulogy for Robert Byrd and Jimmy Carter. I spent time with Jimmy Carter and it's finally caught up with him, but they found a way to keep him going for a lot longer than they anticipated because they found a breakthrough, Biden said at the Democratic National Committee fundraiser. He asked me to do his eulogy, man. Come on. The president then appeared to catch himself for sharing the information, saying, "Excuse me, I shouldn't say that," which also makes me wonder whether or not it was true. Biden was speaking to about 40 guests at a fundraiser in Rancho Santa Fe, alongside Scott Peters, while on a 3-day trip to California and Nevada. Carter, the 39th U.S. president, entered home hospice in Plains, Georgia on February 19th. At 98, he is the longest living American president. Carter's niece said on February 27th that Carter still has some time in him. Yeah, but not very much. Although, as has always been said with Jimmy Carter, if you keep one guinea worm alive in a jar, Jimmy Carter will live forever. Just keep a colony of guinea worms alive in an ant farm. Give them small mammals or whatever to parasitize, but just keep them alive in an ant farm, and Jimmy Carter will live for an eternity. On some good news, and again, one of the things that I always say is that I don't want to see any of these people die in office. I want to see them removed by their constituents. Although in Mitch McConnell's case, I think that we don't have that option because he's getting up there, he's having problems, and he just got reelected. But from NBC News, McConnell discharged from the hospital after treatment for a concussion, which doesn't typically take a few days, even with complicating factors. From Sahil Kapoor, Ryan Nobles, and Frank Thorpe V. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell was discharged from the hospital today, his communications director David Popp said in a statement on Monday. At the advice of his physician, the next step will be a period of physical therapy at an inpatient rehab facility before he returns home, Popp said. Over the course of the treatment this weekend, the leader's medical team discovered that he also suffered a minor rib fracture on Wednesday, for which he is also being treated. McConnell, 81, who was hospitalized Wednesday after he fell at a private dinner and was treated for a concussion, his office said by Friday. A political advisor who visited him in the hospital said he was doing well and eager to leave. The leader and Secretary Chow are deeply thankful for the skilled medical care, prayers, and kindness they have received, Popp said on Monday. An aide told NBC News that McConnell is not expected to return to the Capitol this week, saying that it's very common to undergo physical therapy to regain strength after a hospital stay, and that it ranges anywhere from a week to 2 weeks. So, something else happened. I don't know what. But a concussion, even if you're elderly, even if you had polio, is typically an hour's stay, not a day's stay. And again, now that we're seeing that he had a cracked rib on top of this, but I still, honestly, don't buy the fact that this was just a concussion. I don't know what it could possibly be, but there's something else going on here. I think that's all that I have for government officials behaving badly. How about a truck of peace? 2 dead, 9 injured after truck hits pedestrians in Quebec. From the Associated Press. 2 men died Monday after a pickup truck plowed into pedestrians beside a road in eastern Quebec town of Amqui. A senior Canadian official rapidly ruled out a terrorism attack or a national security incident, mostly because that would be detrimental to the worldview that it's only vicious Republicans that do terrorist attacks. A provincial police spokeswoman said 9 other people were injured, including 2 whose injuries are considered serious. Sergeant Helene St. Pierre said the 30-year-old driver, a local resident, turned himself into police and was arrested under suspicion of committing a fatal hit and run. A senior government official familiar with the matter said the incident was not terrorism or national security related. The official spoke on condition of anonymity, as they were not authorized to speak publicly on the matter. Authorities had not mentioned a motive. Indiscriminate killing, using a weapon other than a firearm to inflict maximum damage in a crowded area. Boy, that sounds like terrorism to me. Especially given the fact that if he turned himself in and they're looking for a motive, that denotes intent. But don't worry, it totally wasn't terrorism. What do I always say? It's not the guns. It's the evil in a person's heart. I will admit that guns make it easier for the evil to manifest itself, but if you take away all the guns, number 1, only criminals will have them, and number 2, even the criminals that don't have them will find some other way to go back and inflict harm. From Insider. A conservative commentator who sexually harassed AOC is suing her for blocking him on Twitter. From Hannah Gettehoon. A far-right commentator. I have listened to Alex Stein's Blaze show. He is not far-right by any stretch of the imagination. He's more classically liberal than I am. And compared to most of the Ignans, I'm pretty liberal. But we'll see what Insider has to say. A far-right commentator who harassed Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the steps of the Capitol last year filed a suit Wednesday claiming AOC violated his First Amendment rights by doing so. Alex Stein, a commentator on the Blaze TV, a media network founded by Glenn Beck, gained attention in June 2022 after he filmed himself yelling at Ocasio-Cortez, calling her his favorite big booty Latina, which is weird because she doesn't actually have a big booty, and accused her of wanting to kill babies. In the suit, Stein claims that Ocasio-Cortez was actually flattered by his comments, supposedly evidenced by her flashing a peace sign at him, but blocked him when she realized that he was not a political ally. The lawsuit also provides a screenshot from Stein's account showing that he was blocked. Stein's lawyers request that he immediately be unblocked from the AOC Twitter account, Ocasio-Cortez's personal account, which the suit describes as her de facto official account. The suit, Knight First Amendment Institute versus Donald J. Trump, in which a federal judge ruled in 2018 that Trump had violated the First Amendment by blocking his critics on Twitter via his personal @RealDonaldTrump account. The ruling established that personal accounts can turn into government one if one becomes an organ of an official business. Mr. Stein desires to engage in political discussions in the robust public forum that is Ms. Cortez's huge Twitter account, Stein's lawyer wrote. However, another suit, Campbell versus Reich, maintained that certain accounts run by government officials, even those that sometimes tweet about official government proceedings, can still be considered personal and therefore exempt from this rule. Following the harassment from Stein, Ocasio-Cortez called on the incident deeply disgusting and said Stein was seeking extremist fame. Chavez also later criticized the Capitol Police for not doing anything in response to Stein's comments. Why? What could they do? Number one, yes, you want to kill babies. That is an established fact. And number two, while you don't really have a big booty, there was nothing going on, and you were into this until you realized after the fact, after people started telling you, hey, this guy's a Blaze guy, maybe you might not want to engage in this. Only then did we start to hear, oh, well, okay, now we're going to file suit, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. I don't know where Alex Stein lives, by the way, but one thing that I can say about this is, actually, I don't think that he has a case in this. Because and we've looked at this with other government officials as well, where that does seem to only apply to their constituents. With Donald Trump being the president, of course, all of the United States and its territories are his constituents. Honestly, in the case of Stein, unless he lives in that district in New York, I don't think he's got a case on this. It would be interesting to see where the courts rule on it, though, where they land on it, because of Cortez's massive platform that's nationwide. There are plenty more people that follow her than just what's in her district. I'm actually one of them. I'm not afraid to admit it. I thought that she was going to be kind of cool and be an outsider, breaking up the establishment, before I found out that she was actually going to become establishment, and I just never got around to unfollowing. As to why she approached him and flashed a peace sign following his lewd comments, Ocasio-Cortez, she was actually walking over to deck him, but decided to stop herself. No, you weren't. Don't lie. Chavez has been sued for blocking individuals on Twitter, and some First Amendment experts have criticized her for it. In 2019, the Congresswoman apologized and settled a lawsuit filed by former Brooklyn Assemblyman Dov Hikind, a conservative, who said she had previously blocked. Well, again, in that general area in Brooklyn, that stands a good chance of being an actual constituent. However, she said in 2019 she would not stop blocking people on her personal account, and she stood by her decision. Well, I'm going to say right off the bat that this is all really, really stupid. This is going on things that I hate, so we're going to save that one. But I wanted to just touch on this one here, and then I think we're going to call it. We'll do rules of acquisition still, and I think we're going to call it. And I'm going to go get offline and strategize how to get some of my audience back. But this one here, coming from Caleb Park, says, notice the reaction of the View host when Jane Fonda says to murder pro-lifers. Tells you everything that you need to know about the pro-life side. Or pro-abortion side, rather.
Well, I think all the stuff that's gone on with the change in laws and the backsliding in the country is pretty terrifically awful.
It's going backwards.
And we have
though,
yeah.
we have experienced many decades now of having agency over our body, of being able to determine when and how many children to have. We know what that feels like. We know what that's done for our lives. We're not going back. I don't care what the laws are. We're not going back.
I think the women will rise up.
That's the activist
That's Jane
speaking, and she probably will get a Nobel Prize.
But it's the truth.
Very soon.
It is the truth. We're not going to do it.
Besides
We're gonna
marching
fight.
and protesting, what else do you suggest?
Well,
Well,
it
I
doesn't
thought of
happen
murder.
overnight. It's not a miraculous What did you say?
Murder.
She's kidding. Wait a second. She's just
Now,
kidding.
don't say that. That's
Oh, you
not-
don't know. They'll pick up on that and
Yeah,
just run
that's
with
the
it.
worst.
She's just
joking.
kidding. It's
Well, let me talk to you about.
Yeah, she's not kidding. But again, what's funny about the fact that is what people picked up on. These people are not above going out. And by the way, they accuse everybody else of going back to try to murder their own political dissidents at this point. But people like Fonda, who have sat in her ivory tower, and I mean, like, she doesn't even have to think about this. Anybody who is not in her inner circle is just some sort of pleb to her and just some sort of unwashed mass. These are not people to her. These are not her peers. She has no problem. And, I mean, you look at the shade, and she wasn't kidding when she said that. She wasn't. Anybody who's not with her is the enemy, and we're moving further and further toward this. I don't have a beanie here, otherwise I'd start screaming Civil War. All right, let's look at the rules of acquisition. Let's head out of here for the day. Let's get the music back up. And let's grab this one. Alright, so the last thing that we do on Tuesday, which used to be our Monday close, however, we got to the point where we wanted to do live chat on Monday instead, so people can go out and have fun on Friday nights instead of having to be here. Because I know it's going to be hard to start scheduling stuff on a Friday night, it really is. But we moved this out, we moved everything around, so Twitter trending is now over on Tuesday, or on Friday nights rather. Live chat is on Monday, and rules of acquisition are on Tuesday. So every day we look at one of the Ferengi rules of acquisition from the popular Star Trek franchise, look at how it is advocated and used in the show, or in the lore of Star Trek, whichever is applicable, and in most cases, how we can actually use this in our hyper-capitalistic lives. So, last week, we read the 153rd rule of acquisition, sell the sizzle and not the steak. Now, in both, this chart that we uses both alpha, the TV shows, and beta canons, but in both of those canons, we're missing 8 rules of acquisition between, so we jump right from the 153rd to the 162nd rule of acquisition, which is actually kind of important to look at as we go into a very, very recessionary period in life. The 162nd rule of acquisition states, even in the worst of times, someone turns a profit. This is from a reference book, The Ferengi Rules of Acquisition, but also a DS9 video game, Harbinger, which I've never even heard of. Kind of like to look into that one and see. I'm sure, especially given the fact that it's the 90s, it's probably either text-based or low graphical situation, but regardless, it'll have the text and the rules in here. But let's look at the 162nd rule of acquisition and what it means in reality. Even in the worst of times, someone turns a profit. Even in the hardest of the Great Depressions, in our Great Depression in this country, there were still people that were making money hand over fist. A lot of them were government contractors who were building bridges to nowhere and doing road projects that had no end in sight. But even in the worst of times, someone turns a profit. And that's the same thing in any other capitalistic society. It's something that I'm hoping to capitalize on in the midst of what we're doing here. And I mean, even like I said on Silentcaster show the other night, when we look into and we see, like I said that OnlyFans is probably going to hold up the economy. And this is the kind of thing that I mean by that when I say something like that. There are always going to be people who have either a unique, or in the OnlyFans case, a common talent that everybody's dying for. A unique talent, or a service, or the ability to provide a service in places where other people cannot or won't provide a service. And somebody's going to be turning a profit. Some businesses are going to go under, and some of them are going to be right there to go pick them back up. Some salesmen are going to be relieved from the industry, no matter what it is that they're selling, and some of them are going to be there to pick up their customer base. Even with people having very little money, there's still going to be commerce. People are still going to buy food. People are still going to have to go get to the jobs that they're at. And yes, there's still going to be people out there. Like, I've got a cousin that's in the campground business. Obviously, I won't advertise what his campground is, number one, because he's not paying for it. That's the 13th rule of acquisition. Nothing worth doing is worth doing, or anything worth doing is worth doing for profit, including advertising for a family business. But even there are going to be people who either have the money or have the assets of their camper or tent that are still going to try to find a weekend away in a cheap manner out in the country. Somebody's going to be turning a profit. It might be fewer than normal people, but even in the worst of times, there is going to be somebody out there who can turn a profit. So don't despair. And, you know, I'll take some of the advice that Styx puts out there. Even if you think you're in fear of having losing your job. I don't think I am right now, by the way, just because I've kind of established myself where I work. But even if you are in fear, or you think that your job may be on the bubble, and if just one more bad piece of financial news is up there, pick up a skill. Pick up that guitar. Learn how to do a few bars. If nothing else, you can go under the bridge and play for change. There are people that make very good money off of that. Figure out how to stream. Do some video game stuff. There are people that actually enjoy that. Even if you're not a large-chested Twitch streamer, there are still people that enjoy that. I'm learning distilling right now. Looking at the recipes, looking at equipment right now, but I'm learning how to do that. I'm looking at ways that I can home make a still. Don't worry, government. I'm getting licensed for it. Because just like I said with the 13th rule of acquisition, anything that's worth doing is worth doing for profit. So, yes, I will be going through and jumping through your hoops and doing it the way that you want to. I'm not going to like it, but I'm going to do it. Write. If you've got that idea, that little fantasy in your head, write it down. Or write a report. Or I think that some of the former Bears out there could probably write a little bit about their time with the Owen Benjamin cult. There are a lot of different things out there that you could still be out there, and you can capitalize on some of the niche ends of things. So, I do anticipate that there are going to be some hard times. I really do. I don't know how bad it's going to get. I see signals and markers that it's going to be worse than 08 and possibly into 1920s level. But I see indicators and markings that say that we'll barely get a scratch. But no matter what, even if we do get into the worst of times, somebody is still going to turn a profit. And I do intend to be one of those people that is still turning a profit. And I hope that you guys are as well. Anybody who watches this both live and on the replay, I hope that you are as well, one of those people that turns the profit. By watching this show, I would say that you deserve it. And with that, we are done. We're out of here. Interesting show. Again, I don't know if there was maybe some pushback over something that I did over the weekend when I finally had a call out to the people who do nothing but go back and scream "the Jews" in the live chat constantly. Or whether it just is the fact that there is a little bit of news burnout right now, I think. But, well, we've still got people in here, and I've always said, as long as one person watches, I will keep doing this until such time that there is no more. But let's throw some outro music up and head out of here. All right. So thanks everybody who came by, hung out, chatted in the live chat. It was a great time today. Looking forward to seeing you guys here tomorrow or on the replays as well. Looking back for some of that. 6 p.m. Central Time to to see what's happening on the next day, and we will see what happens in the next 22 hours. Definitely looking forward to that. And do feel free to go check out some of the other great programming that was listed before, if they are on. I don't know when Daily Ignoramus is coming back, but go check him out as well. We'll be back here, though, for more news, more headlines, more contemporary. I don't know what we're going to talk about tomorrow, but I know we'll have a little bit of a inkling into something that I'm thankful for, something that restores my faith in humanity, which I do have to think about a little bit here, because I really don't want to make it about the move one more time, but we'll see what happens. We will see you here tomorrow, same time, same channels. And until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.